Hey everybody, it's Susabelle from Patchwork Chicken Studio. It's Thursday, so it's Thursday in the studio. I hope you're having a good day. It's a little thundery here right now, so some sun, but then not some sun, but that's typical for Colorado actually to have kind of a mix. But anyway, we should be fine. So tonight I thought I would talk about another one of my sewing machines. This is a hot topic for some people. They want to know what I sew with. They also want to know how these things work. And if you're not a sewist, if you don't work with sewing machines, sometimes this stuff is a big mystery. So as I've mentioned before, most of my machines are antiques. So I classify as antique anything that's my age. Or maybe a little bit younger. I'm 57. I'll be 58 this month. My birthday is coming up. But all of my machines, for the most part, are older than I am, except for one. I actually two. I have one in the closet that I haven't tried it yet, but it's the late 60s, I think. But I have this Serger, and I'm going to talk about my Serger today. And again, this is another machine that my brother found for me. I love it when he can do that kind of stuff. And so it's a Pfaff, so made in Germany, made in West Germany. So that sort of tells us a little bit about the date. It's pre-1984. It's actually older than that. But Pfaff made a whole series, they still do, of these Sergers called Hobbylocks. So they all have different numbers. This is a Hobbylock 795, and it's marked electronic, which is another clue to its age. Can't find its exact age, but I can get close based on some of the things I found. And so one of the things that is funny for me is my brother did find the manual that went with it, the original manual. So I'm gonna put this up here because they're showing her how to put her foot on the go-go pedal, and if you notice, she's got heels on. So this to me means pre-1974. So I'm dating this one to the mid-60s. Hi, Dana. I think just the shoe, she's wearing a high heel. It's because that's how we also put on our high heels. I'm actually sitting here barefoot, so there. I drive barefoot most of the time. So I think it's probably from the mid-60s, maybe. I'm not sure. I can't find a date on it. But as with all things Pfaff, it's a complex machine. And the little user manual goes into extreme detail about how to do absolutely everything. My brother likes to say, you know, when I complain about how many loops I have to put things through and whatever to sew on a Pfaff, he says, well, they're Germans. If one is good, three is better. So I get that. You know, like BMWs are built in Germany. They're pretty cool too. So anyway, I have the manual, so if I ever have trouble with it, I know exactly what to do. But if you don't know what a serger does, so a serger is a sewing machine, but it does a very specific thing. So if you've ever bought a t-shirt, I'm sure we've all bought t-shirts, the seams on a t-shirt are serged, and that's what they look like. So it seals it in, it creates the seam, but it also seals in the edges so it doesn't curl up, so it doesn't ravel away. That's the purpose of a serged seam. A lot of the clothing that you buy commercially has serged seams. That's so they don't ravel, gives them a good finish. Sergers are also very fast, and it's a way to only stitch once when maybe you might have to stitch twice. For people who don't have a serger and they need to finish seams, they've got to use a zigzag or a special stitch to do that, and it can be cumbersome. This way it just does everything, creates the seam and finishes the edges. And I use it to make my jar cozies. So make these. I am so backwards. I don't do the Vanna thing very well. This is a jar cozy. This is a quart jar drinker. So we use a lot of these out here in Colorado because we are supposed to drink a lot because it's dry. It's really desert-like here, even though I'm right on the mountains. It is very dry here, so we drink a lot, and it's a good way to measure how much you're drinking. But these can sweat because it's glass, and so I make these little cozies that go over here, which catch the sweat, also insulates it a little bit, and makes it not so likely to break if it falls over. So I make these, but in order to give them a good finish, I serge their seams. So you can see that there. And it even works on a curved piece. You notice this one's round, and I did that on a serger as well. So the serging stitch really captures everything in there and makes a nice neat finish. Not that you would see this very often, it's inside, but these are washable. So the more you washed them, if they weren't finished, those seams weren't finished, they would ravel and that would just be messy. So I use the serger on those. And I want to show you a little bit more about the machine, and then I'll show you how it sews. So I'm going to move the camera, and I'm going to try not to make you dizzy. Getting a good view of my messy space over here. So this is my serger. And this is what they look like. And almost all sergers look the same. So there's 4 threads that come through this machine. They actually come through a set of loopers behind the scenes here. So you can see those threads come in here and they go through these little sections and come up to the top, and that's where they do their thing. The most important thing about a serger is not just the threads, but there's a blade, and I know you're not going to be able to see that, but that's very sharp. It's a razor blade, and what it does is as you sew, it cuts off, trims off the fabric, and then these 4 threads combine to give you that finished seam. So it cuts and binds with that thread all at the same time. So it's pretty magical. It gets very dirty. So last night I serged up the edges of some towels that I was turning into rags, and you can see all the little pieces of terry cloth down in there. It needs a good vacuuming again. So it does make a lot of dust, and it also makes a long string of fabric from that cut. So my trash can always looks a little interesting after I've been serging. The top of the serger, you can see on the back there's the 4 cones of thread, and that thread is very specific to a serger, and it's poly cotton mix. And then it goes up here through these brackets and feeds down to the top of the machine. So if anything is out of alignment when you're working with your serger, it won't work right. And if the thread comes out, you've got a good 10-minute job ahead of you to try to put it all back where it belongs. Fortunately, the manual does give me instructions, including pictures, so I know if I've lost a thread or one's broken, I know how to put it back in. The other oddity about a serger, you notice there's some thread hanging here. This is actually the thread that's left from me stitching. And with a serger, you don't trim the thread next to the fabric. You let more thread come out a good inch or inch and a half, and then you trim it. You always want these tails here, otherwise the loopers will become unthreaded and you'll be stuck trying to fix it all again. Some people who serge, and I do this as well, when these spools run out or get close to running out, you put a new spool on and you actually use a square knot to tie the thread of the new spool onto the old spool. And then just let it run. It'll go right through and you won't have to thread any of those loopers. It just threads itself by pulling it through. So there are some techniques to using a serger. It's not a beginner machine by any means, but having one and learning how to use one, if you're sewing a lot, it's just a really valuable tool. I've used it to serge the seams on fancy dresses. I made a couple of bridesmaids dresses one time, and I needed a really good finish on those bridesmaids dresses so they wouldn't ravel because it was this slippery satin, and boy did it look good, and it kept its shape, and it was really, really nice. So I'm going to do just a little tiny project. So I like to use this double quilted fabric, and if you can see that, it's just got a little polyfill in it, cotton fabric. You can buy this fabric. You can buy it in all kinds of colors and styles. These happen to look both good on both sides. And this is a scrap from another project, so it's not very exciting, but there it is. And I like to make little pouches. Pouches are probably the easiest thing to do. And you can go fancy or very plain, and I'm going to go pretty plain on this one. And you can decide whether you want your serging stitches to be inside the pouch or whether you're okay with them just being on the outside. If you're a child of the 70s and early 80s like I am, we wore our shirts with the seams on the outside. That's the way they made them. It was supposed to be cool. I don't know. Everybody always said, hey, your shirt's inside out. So in order to use the serger, I want to make sure, let's get my camera over here just a little bit. I want to make sure that I've left enough space for the razor blade to work. So usually about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch of fabric is going to get cut off. You can do more. You can do 1/2 inch, whatever you need to do. But you need at least that 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch so that it has something to cut off so it can seal those edges. Now I'm going to try to put the camera to the back because I want you to see how it comes out on the back side. And I'm going to apologize if the table bounces a little bit. It's because the machine is bouncing its way through its stitches. So I'm just going to start. It is noisy, so I'll stop talking while it's running. Now notice I ran it until I have thread, and then I cut. I need that little piece of thread sticking out there. And I'm going to go ahead and do this other side. And snip that one. And so you can see there's the threads from when I started, so I can snip those off. Don't need those. And I have my little pouch. This is about the easiest thing you can do. And I've made pouches for big things. We do shows, and so we have signs that we take. They're the acrylic, you know, that kind of loose side acrylic, and they scratch like nobody's business. So we transport them in pouches that I've made just this way, just this simple. And I can use this pouch just like this. I'll put my phone in there. Okay. Or if I don't like those rough edges, I can always turn it inside out. And because this was two-sided fabric, I'll have a pretty side regardless of what I do. I'm going to poke those corners out a little bit here. And my phone will fit in there. How about that? Pretty cool, huh? And I can always turn this in and make a hem if I wanted to. So if I wanted to get out my other machine and make a hem, I could. I don't really care because this is sturdy enough the way it is and it's not going to ravel. And you can make these any size you want. So big or little, this one's pretty small. I've made one for digital cameras. I've made them for my iPod, for storing things. They're great for taking around crochet hooks if you have crochet hooks. Also holds pens, whatever. You can pretty much put anything you want in there. And this is a really, really quick project. And you'll notice that I had already serge the top before I started, but I normally serge the loose edge first and then serge the sides and make my little pouch. So that's how we do it. So my recommendation for a serger is don't necessarily look at a new one. They're very expensive. I've seen them for as much as, you know, $1,000, you know, $1,200. For something that you only use occasionally, you may not need that. You may be better off with something, you know, a little cheaper. But a new cheaper machine is not going to work well. And I did for a long time have an off-brand something lock. I forget what it was. It was my mother's, and it aggravated her, and she got a better one and then gave me that one. And I spent a lot of time being aggravated at it. We come unthreaded all the time, break thread. It was annoying. And getting one that had some quality like this Pfaff really has made a difference. Even though it's old, it's probably 40 to 50 years old, works great and doesn't give me any grief. So I would say look for something a little older. Look for something that has a good name on it. So the one I had that was an off-brand of something, have no idea who made it. It wasn't a Singer. It wasn't a name brand. I'm in love with the Pfaff, but that's just me. And that's the one that I, will take with me all of the places that I go. You do have to care for them. So they do need to be clean. Like I showed you a little terry cloth in there. I'm going to have to clean that out. It'll get worked up into the guts of the machine, and I don't want that. Or get stuck on the threads and get pulled through. Could break a thread, that kind of thing. So they do have to be clean, and they are dusty. And there's of course all these little strips. That's what came off of the cutting. And there's a little holder holds those, but I need to make sure I empty that on a regular basis. And it does need to be oiled just like any other machine. So The value of the machine is in, do you use it? So a machine that sits rots. And do you keep it clean? Do you take care of it? Do you oil it regularly? Do you make sure it's clean inside? Do you vacuum it out? You don't ever want to use canned air. That seems like a good idea, but it blows in to the machine, so it blows some of that crud up in there, and you don't want that. When you're looking for a serger, it should be heavy. This one's heavy, weighs about 32 pounds. That's so it won't bounce across the table when you're trying to sew. Sergers are doing a hard job, and they do it fast, so they're moving. So you want one that has some heft to it, some weight to it. So it should be reasonably heavy. You want to make sure that it isn't missing too many parts. The thread holder up at the top of the machine is critical. So if it's missing that, that's a bad thing. You want to make sure that it has that in there. I'm always willing to talk to people about sewing machines and what you can do. If you have an old one sitting around and you can't make it run, I might be able to help you. I've learned a lot of stuff from my brother, who is truly an ace at it, and he'll try to get anything running. He has no fear. I tend to look a little closer before I buy, but every machine I've gotten from him has been wonderful and definitely worth the effort that he took to fix it. And this is no exception. This one came pretty much ready to go, just needed a few odds and ends. I actually broke the razor blade about 2 months after I got it from him, and it's not something you can replace yourself. It says you can in the book, but it's not really something you can replace yourself. That screw is really, really tight. So I ended up having to take it up to the repair guy, my nearest shop, and have him do it. And of course, it took him 2 minutes. He didn't even take it out of the box it was in. He just did it right there. But the other thing I had was the telescoping arm on my thread was stuck down, and I could only get it up so far. And he fixed that too, and charged me $10. So it was good. Anyway, I hope everybody's having a good night. I'm gonna do some more sewing tonight since I've grabbed the serger and gotten it out on the table. I might as well get some stuff done. It normally sits aside because I don't use it every day. And if you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comments. Feel free to message us. You can always message us through our page. And if you're interested in knowing more about the jar cozies, please let me know. Be happy to talk about them. I love these things. I use them all the time. There's always one in the wash, and one is being used. So these are great. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Take care. Have a good evening.